Hello and welcome to In the Bottle. I'm your host, Angelica Nora, and my aim each week is, to introduce you to wine varietals you may not have heard of before from world-class wineries from around the globe. My hope is that you leave curious to try something a little bit different. Before we get started, though, I want to, of course, thank you for tuning in, and I want to give an even bigger thank you to the team here at Studio 24/7 who are the ultimate experts in these virtual events. I highly recommend them, and I cannot thank them enough for showing up for me week after week and making me look fabulous. Thank you. And secondly, remember, this is an interactive show. If you have any questions, if something doesn't make any sense to you, please feel free to pop the question into our chat box and we'll do our best to answer it for you, because sometimes myself and my guests, when you've been doing wine for such a long time, you kind of forget what's common knowledge and what's a learned bit of knowledge. So please, whatever we can help you with, pop it into the chat box. And on that, today I am so excited and kind of fangirling about our guest, Samantha Payne. I first met Sam when she was actually a panelist at a conversation around how social media influences our wine choices and also influences what wineries choose to make, I guess. I thought personally that she was a total rock star. For those that don't know her though, Samantha Payne is a sommelier and communicator who consults on multiple wine lists in Sydney, and she hosts various wine field events and vineyard tours all around Australia, while also writing regularly about wine, spirits, food, travel for various publications, both domestically and internationally. She's been featured in Concrete Playground, she's been featured in Decanter, Condé Nast Traveller, Broadsheet, Guardian Australia, and so much more. I told you, she's a rock star. She was also awarded a place in the 2015 Wine Australia Future Leader of Wine program and hosts a wine video channel called How to Drink Wine with Samantha on The Guardian. And for those who regularly watch this show, you will know our focus is usually international wines. I confess I'm still an Australian wine newbie, and today Samantha will be walking us through what she calls experimental or new wave Australian wines. So without further ado, put your virtual hands together for Samantha Payne. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a long time coming. It's you're our first Somm, you're our first communicator on the show. So I think the difference between you being here and everyone else is that you got to bring stuff from all different wineries, which I'm really excited about.
I did, and stuff from also my own personal collection, so I can advocate and vouch for almost every bottle of wine that we've got on the table here today.
I am so excited. Before we get started, for those playing at home, what the hell do you mean by experimental wines? What are we talking about here?
When we talk about experimental and new wave wines in Australia, we're talking things a little bit more outside the box, whether that be from winemaking style, from winemaking techniques, also the grape varieties that we're talking about today. We're talking about the non-classic sort of things like Shiraz, Chardonnay, et cetera, and also how they're made. The beauty of that is sort of picking this as a lineup is showcasing the fact that here in Australia, unlike places like France and Italy that you focused on other times in your show, we're not constricted by appellation controls. So we get to plant whatever we like, wherever we want, and we can make it however we choose to. And because of that, Australia tends to be at the forefront for innovation. We have planted, we've got over 100 plus different grape varieties grown here in Australia across 65 distinct wine growing regions. So it's a lot of fun to sort of go out into these places, obviously pre-COVID, and sort of see what everybody was playing around with and working with, and the development of Australian wine as a whole collectively. So it's really exciting.
Okay, I'm excited. And what also makes me very happy is that you did think to bring a bubbles.
Of
so
course.
Everyone who watches this knows that I'm obsessed with bubbles. So tell me about this. What are we drinking first?
So we have first up a little what we call sort of ancestral or Pet Nat style of sparkling. This actually comes from the Del Zotto family in the King Valley in Victoria, so northeastern Victoria. This is what they call in Italian is their col fondo style. So this is their Pet Nat style, which for those people who don't know what Pet Nat is, it's obviously it only goes through single fermentation instead of a secondary fermentation. So it sees no disgorgement, which means it's unfiltered and unfine, which is why it's got that cloudiness in the glass there.
Yes, for those that can see, that is super cloudy. Isn't this the point of the champagne producers were like, we don't want to drink cloudy wine? Like, when has this become such a popular thing again?
I think it's definitely exploded in the market here in Australia over the past 5 years. The development of it, at least in the past decade, a lot of that has to come down to the fact that if you think of champagne houses and things like that, it's a lot of money to make sparkling wine. The amount of time that obviously you leave things on lees or in the cellar or in the caves over in France and things like that, accountants hate sparkling and champagne, and the winemakers love it. So I think Pet Nats and ancestral styles of sparkling are a really great way for winemakers to tip their toe in that wonderful sparkling wine pool and see what they can make. What's really special about this is this actually comes off the very first Prosecco vines ever planted in Australia in 1999. So there's a lot of history in this particular style and bottle. Also the fact that Colfondo was how Otto del Zotto made it over in Val di Bione. And it's named after his father, Giovanni, who died in 1971. So much history in this bottle. And that's the other thing that I love when we talk about these wines is the story behind them. You know, each one of them means something special to each of the winemakers.
Well, cheers to that.
Cheers.
So Prosecco, wow. But alcohol content-wise, are they the same being a Pet Nat, or are they a bit lower? Or
Tends to be a little bit lower because you have to remember, everyone knows obviously simple process of fermentation and sparkling. I think of it like Pac-Man. All the yeast eats all the sugar equals carbon dioxide and alcohol. When you're only doing a single fermentation as opposed to a secondary fermentation, you've basically got all the yeast eating all the sugar just in one go, as opposed to topping it up with more sugar, which basically brings up your alcohol percentage generally by a point and a half.
And it's quite dry.
Yeah.
For a Prosecco. Actually, bring that bottle here so that we can get it a little bit closer. This is absolutely gorgeous. I love that they can just put it in a bottle and, put a little label on it and we're done.
Yeah, and you can tell obviously the top. So that crown seal is generally how they live in the cellars in Champagne before they're disgorged and in goes with a cork and things like that. So this is how it looks like in the thing before disgorgement. So.
I love it. That is delicious. It's like bone dry. Like not bone dry, but it's like very dry for a Prosecco.
Yeah, I kind of like it. It's got that almost like chamomile kind of characteristic to it. There's a bit of floral in there. It's very sort of delicate, really nice and dry and fresh. So
that's a great way to start this, I think. For those at home, if you have any questions about Pet Nats or I guess ancestral sparkling, please make sure you pop it into the question box. But we're going to move on to a very exciting little Chardonnay, I believe.
Yes.
All right, let's try that one. So what are we looking at now?
So I've brought something from my own personal collection because our friend Peter Dredge, who makes this Dr. Edge Chardonnay, it sells out every time he releases it. So this is the very first Chardonnay that he made under the Dr. Edge label.
Sorry, what's Dr. Edge?
Dr. Edge. So Dr. Edge was Peter's nickname in university. His last name being Dredge, so Dr. Edge.
Oh, okay.
Little bit of fun with that one.
Like some sort of story there. It's like literally, it's just like no.
It's literally just Dr. They called him Dr. Edge at uni.
Wow, it smells amazing.
Yeah, so this is obviously in that sort of new wave of Australian Chardonnay. So everyone obviously remembers the Chardonnay from the 80s, those really big, oaky, buttery, Robert Parker-esque styles of wine. We then obviously pendulum swung into the early 2000s and we're creating very sort of lean, dry, very almost anemic styles of Chardonnay.
Anemic.
I would say just really tight.
Yep.
So that kind of thing. So I think now is the golden era of Chardonnay across the country.
Is that because you're finding like this balance between both?
Absolutely. So really nice integration of oak, obviously with really nice sort of ripe fruit, but also capturing that sort of acidity and that delicacy to it.
Oh, it's amazing.
So
this is from Tasmania?
This is from Tasmania.
Yeah. Tell me about that. Tell me about the situation there.
So obviously cool climate. So trying to also emulate and capture all that acidity and freshness that we were talking about. This is the 2018 was the very first vintage of Dr. Edge Chardonnay. So it is a combination of the 3 sites which he gets grapes from. So the north, the south, and the east. So
are they so distinctly different?
They are. The thing about Tasmania is we tend to sort of lump it all together, whereas each sort of, when you look at the Derwent Valley versus the Tamar Valley versus, the East Coast and things like that, even the Huon Valley, each of them have their own microclimates and those mesoclimates and those kind of characteristics.
Okay.
like every other wine growing region around Australia, I imagine in time it will develop and we'll start talking about more of the sub-regionality of Tasmania. But it's that very much let's walk before we can run kind of thing. So we want to be, obviously, we talk about Tasmania as a whole and then we talk about these sub-regions and things like that.
I think that there have been a lot of discussions lately around like appellating in a way the Tasmania, because it is so distinctly different between the different corners of Tasmania, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what is Dr. Edge, like how does he do this differently? Like what?
So what he's done in the 2019 vintage was basically has released individual site Chardonnays, which he calls North, South and East, to basically explain these characteristics and see them through the wine. And when they're not sold out on the website, you can buy them in a pack and see them all side by side next to the blend and things like that. So
this is a blend of the three. So what are we expecting from this? Like what is it that we need to expect on the nose and the palate?
So for me, this is that sort of, we're heading into that almost gunflint smoky kind of characteristic. It's very sort of bright and fresh on the palate. The oak usage is obviously there, but he always ferments in old oak casks because he doesn't want to dominate that with those French vanilla buttery kind of notes. He's trying to really let not only the beautiful grapes, of Tasmania sort of speak for themselves, but also, the different sites and things like that.
Does they sit on leaves? Does if it's
it does?
It's quite creamy.
It does. Yes.
It smells really creamy. See, I do know my things.
There
sometimes.
you go. So I've spoken about obviously blended vineyards, with the 2018 being that first vintage and also Tasmania having such a difficult vintage. This is actually all South fruit. So Peter Contract wine makes for a wonderful family called the Dean family, who own Meadowbank down in Tasmania.
Okay. Yeah.
So the fruit for this all comes from the south, what they call the South Block. So this
I'm just going to sit here drinking this because
this is
very
good. Yeah.
If the acidity is bright and fresh, it's got that beautiful creaminess. It's got like it's like rock melon lolly, like the something in cream, like a.
It's like
melon
the
cream.
peaches. It's the peaches and cream that
Peaches
you see in
and
that
cream.
Allen's kind of thing.
It is so delicious.
For me, more so than any sort of distinct characteristic, it's the mouthfeel of this wine. It's just got this beautiful mid-palate weight to it. But again, because of that cool climate freshness, it just finishes so dry and crisp.
So good.
It's so delicious.
It's so good.
Like this for me is like Sunday lunch with friends. Like you've got porchetta kind of thing. You want something that's just that slightly bit sort of fatty, like that kind of thing.
We're teasing everyone because you can't actually buy this wine.
I know. However,
drinking
2019 vintage is available in restaurants. So
in restaurants, okay.
you can go down and visit my friend Stu at Fix WineBar on Elizabeth Street.
He's looking at you, Stu.
Yeah, he's looking at you, Stu. For any Sydney ciders, he has the 2019 vintage. Absolutely.
Coming into
but yeah, so unfortunately been sold on the website. And it is something that you want to try, he obviously announces the new releases on his socials and things like that. Get on it quick because they
and does
sell
he do
out.
anything else? Does he do? It's just Chardonnay, or does
No,
he do
Pinot as well. So Chardonnay and Pinot is under the Dr. Edge label. He also does a Pet Nat, or that ancestral style sparkling, what he calls under the Dr. Ongo label.
Dr. Ongo.
Like Drongo.
Drongo. Oh my God.
And he also makes wine over in the States. So hopefully we'll be seeing that on our shores very soon.
That'd be great.
But obviously the world being what it is, it might be held up a little bit, but those will be really exciting Pinots and Chardonnays as well.
It's just so cool to see someone taking a variety that everyone knows, Chardonnay, and experimenting with it.
Yeah.
And just seeing and like playing with its own kind of style of terroir.
Exactly.
Here in Australia. That's so cool. I really don't want to tip this out. I'm just going to drink this. Well done. That is a really, really nice wine. But now it looks like we're going to move on to a rosé.
We are.
Yeah, okay. I might give you that one to take back on your side.
Yes.
And let's have a look. So what is this rosé and how is it experimental?
So this is a fun little experimental wine from Gilbert Family Wines down
the guys in Mudgee.
Orange. Yes.
Oh, Orange.
Orange
Okay.
and Mudgee.
Nice. I love their wines. I've drank a lot of their Pet Nat Riesling actually.
Yes.
Yeah. That's at PS40. But I drink a lot of that in my cocktails every day that they're open. Awesome. I love this bottle. All right, so tell me about this.
So
It's actually called experimental rosé.
It is called experimental rosé. It does what it says on the label. So what's exciting about this wine is that it's carbonic macerated Pinot Gris.
What's that?
So
For those at home,
for those at home,
obviously I know what that is.
for those at home that don't know what carbonic maceration is, it's probably one of my favorite stories to tell in terms of winemaking techniques. So imagine that you take, you've picked all your grapes, you want to throw them into a tank or a vat, you throw dry ice in there and basically seal it up. What this does is creates an anaerobic environment and kicks off almost like a mini fermentation process within each of the berries.
Oh, wow.
So if you were to pick one as this process was going on and bit into it, it would fizz on your tongue because you would feel it fermenting. Basically, what this does is you're sort of kicking off that fermentation quite fast and quite quick, which means you're sort of bumping up those aromatics. You're also getting obviously more skin contact with the juice and the skins together, being each grape being its own little fermenter. And you're also sort of bumping up, phenolics, which is that character inside the mouth and things like that. So it's all about, building texture, color, flavor in a really short space.
Do they do that with any grape? Can you do that with any grape?
You can, yes,
and
absolutely.
they've done this with the Pinot Gris.
I've done this with Pinot Gris. Yep. So Pinot Gris, when you see it on the vine, even though it's white fleshed and white juiced, the outside can be the whole range between pink to also really dark, sort of red skinned.
Okay.
It's why on the market we're seeing a lot more sort of Pinot Gris in that sort of blush kind of color, almost in this sort of rosé kind of color. And that's simply because we're leaving them more and more time on skins to basically bump up that color and bump up that texture.
Nice.
Because all your tannin or that drying sensation of the mouth and all your color comes from the skins.
Yeah,
so the longer you leave your juice on skins, obviously the
tannin.
more it's going to bump that up.
Love my tannin. So they've got the carbonic macerated Pinot Gris, and then what happens?
And so then it's topped with Sangiovese that's made in a rosé that sits on Riesling lees.
What?
Yeah, it's
How
all.
do-
It's
what?
this
How
is
does the
this
Riesling
is this
how
is
does
the
Riesling
true
have Ries?
essence of experimentation.
Okay,
so what happens is, imagine we've got on one side we've got our carbonic macerated Pinot Gris. It's sitting there in its tank. It's all happy.
Yep.
We also have a tank of Sangiovese that's basically sitting in a tank and barrel that's got Riesling lees in it. So for those people that don't know, lees are basically all the must and stems and grapes from that you've picked kind of thing. So imagine your Sangiovese and you've just added the must basically of the Riesling into it.
Okay.
That sort of sits and it's all happy and
So it'll make the Sangiovese more, I guess, the Sangiovese Rosado more aromatic then.
Yeah, absolutely.
For having all that lees and
think
stuff.
of all the wonderful characteristics that you find in Riesling. So, jasmine and chamomile and, a little bit of sort of ginger blossom and things like that. Put that into your Sangiovese, which is all your red fruited characteristics. You've just bumped up all those aromatics and things like that.
Okay. I'm still shocked on the fact that they're Sangiovese. So then do they blend, do they make the two and then blend it at the end?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, so on the note, it's funky on the note. It's got
So this also sees a bit of time in French oak as well,
Yeah,
just
'cause
to
it's got
round
that
out some of those edges.
See, this is where I'm getting confused. I'm like, hang on, is that lees that I'm smelling or is this oak that I'm smelling? So it has a little bit of oak. Okay, cool.
It's neutral French oak, but obviously when you use a vessel like that as opposed to tank or amphora or something like that, it is obviously going to impart some sort of characteristic.
Yeah, you're getting you're getting that little bit of cherry that you'd expect from Sangiovese as well, on the nose, really subtly. But there's something, when there's just something on the nose and I'm trying to pick it up and I can't say. I know you're going to pick something. You're going to say something that I know is, and you'll be like, that's what I'm talking about.
Sangiovese for me always reminds me of rose hip tea. It's got that drying kind of tannins, but you've got red and florals in there.
That smells so good. I wish this had smell-o-vision. You can buy this bottle, right, from the website?
Absolutely. Straight onto the website. Gilbert Family Wines, made by obviously the sons, Will and Simon. But this is the essence of what Australian winemaking is that experimentation with things.
So much acidity.
Yeah.
That's wild.
So dry, fresh, and that's what I love about Australian rosé. Everyone, and with no offense intended to the French whatsoever, but everyone's like Provence rosé. With my sommelier hat on, Provence rosé is a nightmare to pair food-wise with because it's not a really super flavoursome style of rosé. It's acid and minerality and dryness,
to it.
which on a hot summer's day in front of the pool is fantastic.
Or on the Isle of
on the Isle of Capri,
whatever,
wherever you want to be, anywhere
in
but the middle of winter right now.
Exactly. Whereas this is it's voluptuous, it's juicy, it's got beautiful acidity,
but
it's got a
it's
lovely
still
long
dry.
finish. super dry. Super dry. And I think a lot of people, they get scared of the color of rosé.
Yeah.
So we did an episode once where I was like, you have to see that there's different shades of rosé and they can all be super dry. I think humans need to experiment more with rosé.
Yes.
Because Provence is, I'm always frustrated by how much people just go for Provence.
Yeah.
Because there's just nothing to it. It's boring. Like, in my opinion, it's boring.
Well, considering I write all Australian, like, only wine lists, we get out of that problem very quickly.
Yeah. This is delicious. If anyone has any questions on this wine or these wines, or if you have any other questions about the wine making, please feel free to post it and we'll see if we can answer it. I'm not too sure. But this is delicious. I just love how it's voluptuous. Like, it's so rounded in the mouth. Like you talked about the mouth feel of the Dr. Edge.
Yeah.
This has a really lovely mouthfeel as well.
And that literally comes from this experimentation of, okay, what happens when we add Riesling lees into something? Obviously, we're going to bump up the, aromatics and things like that. But then we've carbonic macerated Pinot Gris, which adds in your texture and your tannin and all of these other things.
Oh,
you
so
ask
yummy.
any winemaker, and a lot of them, like I've spoken to, will be like, rosé is such a fickle beast. They'll go through winemaking process and the color will just drop out of it, or something will go awry. So hats off to the boys for actually going, you know what, we're going to experiment with something. We want to try different things. So it's really exciting.
I'm excited about that. I'm definitely need to talk to them about getting a lot of that sent to my house. It's just also like there is a minerality to it, and there's this beautiful chalkiness to it, I guess. I don't know, there's something, but it's just so yummy. It is so yummy. I'm stoked. I'm so glad you brought that. Thank you.
That's all right.
I'm
What's
a
also
rosé and
exciting about
bubbles
this, so this was cold stabilized, so it's actually unfiltered and unfined as well.
Oh, is
and it's still so clear and beautiful.
Really? Mm-hmm. Unfiltered and unfined. Wow. But this is the thing. I think everyone has this idea of what natural wines look like.
Yeah.
Sustainable wines.
Yeah.
Like wines that are just all about looking after your grapes and, having a clean vineyard, having a clean winery.
Yeah.
You can make sustainable wines. You can make beautiful unfiltered wines that don't taste like a rat has just died.
Exactly.
Like, I'm sorry. Like, I just get really frustrated. Like, when, I get really frustrated around this whole natural wine movement, or the organic wine movement, or the biodynamic wine movement.
Yep.
You can make great wine sustainably, and it doesn't have to taste like anything rotten. So
Exactly.
that's me. Love that. Okay, where are we going next?
So we're going to head to our friend over in the Adelaide Hills over there.
Okay.
So white blend actually, but because it spends time on skins, comes out quite golden.
Yes,
and
it
pink.
is. Look at that colour. Wow, so we are looking at Vintalopa. Hi, David, if you're watching.
Hi, Dave.
We haven't seen you for a while. Hope everything's going well down there. Yeah, so Adelaide Hills, that's a interesting area right now.
So obviously had a bit of a traumatic 2020.
No, I think everyone's having a traumatic 2020. Let's face it.
This is true.
This is a very traumatic time for everyone. Like, let's face it. This smells phenomenal, by the way. What is it? What are we looking at?
So this is a combination of Riesling, Gewürztraminer, and
Smell the
Pinot
perfume.
Gris.
Yeah, you can smell the florals, the perfume of the Gewürz.
So Gewürztraminer, for example, in Australia versus, say, France and things like that, for me, always takes on more of a ginger blossom kind of characteristic, or almost like a candied ginger, jasmine kind of thing. Whereas our French counterparts, especially in Alsace, will be that very much Turkish delight, rose petal, that kind of characteristic.
But this also got, it's quite peppery on the nose.
Yeah.
Where's that coming from?
So that's also that's a characteristic of Gewürztraminer when it's had time to settle. It's that spiciness. So like I said, think about ginger. We talk about it as like, an aromatic kind of thing, but if you actually have, ginger in your cooking and things like that, it's actually got a bit of spiciness to it.
Super spicy.
That's what that comes from.
Okay, so Gris, Gewürz, and
Pinot Gris.
So
Pinot Gris, Gewürz, and what did I say? Riesling.
Yeah. Riesling.
So
okay, how is this made?
So 55% Pinot Gris left on skins for 14 days during fermentation. So again, that's where we're getting all this sort of color and things like that. We've then got 35% Gewürztraminer, again left on skins for 14 days. And then we've got just 10% of Riesling to give it that backbone and acidity and the structure for this wine. And that's left on 10 months. So 10 months in sort of oak.
And do you, okay, cool. And what's the story behind this? What's the Urban Winery project?
So Urban Winery project. I've been a part of this for 3-4 years, and something that is just so much fun. So when we could all travel and be in big groups and things like that, Dave would basically come into places like Melbourne and Sydney and Adelaide, and basically set up shop for 2 days in, say, for example, Three Blue Ducks in Rosebery in Sydney, and bring everybody in and feed them and basically show them how we make wine almost in a vacuum. So there'll be giant tubs for people to jump in and pidgeage and foot stomp. Yep. And then he'll show them like how basket pressing works. So we'll tip them into the basket press and people will have a chance to like grind the gears and things like that. And then what's special about this wine is everyone that comes to the events gets their name on a bottle. So somewhere there will be a bottle with my name on it.
No
because
way.
I'm part of it. Yeah.
So whose name's on this one?
Whose name is on this
We
one?
should see if someone's name's on this one.
Sarah Bristow.
Oh, Sarah, you have won a bottle of wine that we are now drinking.
It's delicious. Thank you.
That is such an interesting way because, it's a way for people. Like I think Australians, we go out, we buy a bottle of wine, we drink it. We don't have that connection to why, like how they made that wine. And I think Australians would actually stop buying the under $15 bottle of wine or the $10 bottle of wine if they had a connection to what they're drinking. So this is a fantastic way of educating people on that.
In all the tours that I do and in all the staff trainings and even the online events, I always set them up the same way, which is I let people know, I was like, 1 bottle of wine equals 2.5 kilograms of raw grape material.
Wow.
It works out to be roughly half a vineyard row, but that depends on how long your vineyard row is.
Yeah.
But basically it is a minimum of 12 months of somebody's blood, sweat and tears. And when we set up wine training or we set up a wine event with that context in mind, people already start to think about how much love and care goes into making the glass of wine that they're about to imbibe. And I think a lot of times that human element gets taken away from wine. It's why being a sommelier that we obviously love being a part of people's, collective experiences with food and with music and the company that you're with. It's so important because all of these factors make up the wine that you're about to drink.
Yeah, I feel that that message isn't told enough.
Yeah.
And even when people say to me, like coming from my background of the international wines, and people say to me, oh, champagne's so expensive. I'm like, well, how much would you pay for 6-7 years of someone's life? Say for instance, they've gone out, they've had to grow the vine, they grow the grapes. That's 1 year.
Yeah.
Then they pick the grapes. Then they put them underground for 3-4 years. If it's a vintage, 7-8 years.
Yeah.
And then they leave it in a bottle. They disgorge it. They leave it in a bottle for another year, and then they sell it for $60. Really?
That's why accountants hate sparkling.
Oh, no, it's exactly right. But I think how do we get that message out to people about wine isn't about let's just go drink it, get completely wasted, and wake up tomorrow wondering where we are. There is love and there is care and there is a human element to this. This is amazing.
I know. I love this wine
it's actually
so
tannic
much.
too. It's got a little bit of tannin to it. When we say tannin, obviously we mean that drying sensation. This is beautiful. And that spiciness.
So that whole Riesling, Pinot Gris, Gewürztraminer blend, that kind of holy trinity, we're seeing a lot more of them sort of out in the market. Definitely some in more cooler climate regions like the Yarra Valley and Tasmania and things like that. But Adelaide Hills being that slightly higher elevated altitude handles it well with these aromatic grape varieties. But I love this wine, not only because of the community aspect and the story, but also it's just really delicious.
What would you pair this with food-wise?
I mean, with these because the aromatics are so dominant, I would then sort of start looking at a more sort of pared back flavor meal. So I'm thinking like baked chicken, baked fish, anything in your
super easy.
Yeah, super easy.
So it's totally approachable. That's the
Yes.
thing. Yeah, awesome. That's a great wine. To whoever made this.
Yeah, Sarah, thank you.
Sarah, thank you for your hard stomping on those grapes. Delightful. Do you know much about his labels, Vintalopper's labels?
The Urban Winery Project labels are always a collaboration with an artist globally. So, over the years, he's had some quite famous names work on labels and things like that. If you look at sort of the back or the labels, you can use, who it's by and things like that and their socials and things like that. And also on the website are all those sort of information. So then his white label range is all designed by him and his partner Sharon, who is not only a doctor but a very talented artist as well.
Some people get all the skills.
I know.
Jeez. Here we are talking about wine, and then people can be a doctor and an artist.
And an artist.
How is this even a thing? We can drink wine though. That's awesome.
That's fine. We can talk about them.
Is awesome.
Yeah.
I've always loved what David does. I think Vintalopper is an incredible brand, and he's just an awesome, all round awesome dude. And it's such a shame, he'll build himself back up, but you just feel like he just got his winery and everything was
Yep.
going, and then we had fires. You know,
Yeah.
it's just wild. But yeah, guys, you can actually jump on to Vintalopa's website, I believe, and you can help
Yes.
support all of support him, obviously,
And the
to-
regeneration project.
the
of
regeneration
vines.
project of his vines, but also look out for more Adelaide Hills stuff, because a lot of our big brands like Tomich, they've all been affected by those bushfires as well. So feel free to jump on that. If anyone has any questions, we're going to do some reds, I think.
Yeah, red
after
time.
this.
Absolutely.
I don't want to tip these. These are really interesting for me. I just realised like how much I haven't
It's
been
a lot of
looking at
wine just for the
experimental-
two of us. But when you said, bring stuff along, it was very exciting. It was very hard
I
to
know,
like
but now
cull it back.
how are we not going to drink these all later? This is awful. Does anyone have any questions while we are here? Okay, awesome. All right, I think we're probably overwhelming people today. Where are we going after this?
So we're
Or maybe
heading.
you're just an amazing communicator and you're just
Maybe
explaining
answering
everything.
all the questions. So we are heading down to the Yarra Valley in Victoria to our isolated friends to the south.
Yeah. Good on you, Victoria. Oh, wow, look at the colour on this wine. What are we looking at?
This is, for the champagne lover that you are, this is the Oak Ridge Pinot Meunier.
Pinot Meunier.
Yes.
You can do a Meunier by itself.
You can.
Wow, okay.
And it is delicious. So this is a grape variety that is very close to my heart.
Okay.
Every time I try one, I just get really excited. For those that haven't tried it, obviously one of the Holy Trinity grapes that goes into making champagne normally.
Smells great.
Stylistically wise, I tend to like it. It's sort of lighter than a rosé, lighter than a Pinot, heavier than a rosé in terms of like mouthfeel and weight and things like that. It tends to be super aromatic. So you're thinking sort of those more cranberry, raspberry, red fruited kind of characteristic, and then super floral on the nose. It's generally the characteristics that when you add it to champagne, it bumps up that floral kind of aromatics and things like that.
And what's it doing to the back? Like, what's it doing for the palate? Like,
So palate wise, still quite light. There's a little bit of sort of tannin and things like that, but it's not a hugely overwhelming. This is one of those wines, very much like Gamay, that you
could
chill down.
I was going to say that. Like, I can smell that I want to chill this down.
Exactly. I mean, it's relatively ambient temperature in here is quite cool anyway.
It's quite cool.
So
What Oak Ridge is quite a famous Yarra winemaker. What made you bring this as an experimental wine?
look, I've always loved the Oak Ridge wines. Tim Perrin and Dave Bicknell, they know how to handle, Yarra Valley fruit so beautifully. For me, though, the Pinot Meunier has always been that standout favourite of the range of theirs. It used to be a case where you could only buy this at the cellar door. So I used to, every time I was down there on a trip with either Wine Australia or on my own, I would always, duck in there and grab some bottles to take home and things like that. And I've just seen on Instagram that they've just bottled the 2020 vineyard. So I've already been on the email to be like, get some of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But obviously,
what's this one?
So this is 2019.
Okay.
So current release. So this is still available on the Oak Ridge website.
This colour is just stunning. And is this normal? I wish people could see it. I don't know if they can cut to that. Hopefully if they cut to that, you could see. I'll leave that there for a second. No, you can't. I don't know if you can really see that, but it's this beautiful purple, like light purple colour. I normally, when I talk about wines, I say that purple is a symbol of youth. Will this change, or is this just Meunier? Like, will this go into that ruby red?
This is the depth of colour that this wine has.
So to just get more and more purple rather than go more and more. So now I've just lied to everyone when I tell them that purple means young. No, purple can also be a reflection of the grape varietal. Meunier, for those that don't know, is actually one of the only red grapes that have white flesh.
Yes.
And that's how it goes into champagne. So if we were to just let it macerate into bubbles, we could get this kind of colour in champagne.
Absolutely.
This is stunning. I'm obsessed with that. Okay, nose-wise, yeah, you're definitely right. Like that, it's got a little bit rhubarby too.
Yeah,
rhubarb.
definitely rhubarb stalks, and that you get a little bit more savouriness. And sort of just going through when I was sort of preparing for the session, like going over the notes, I'm actually really surprised that this is it's all like it's whole berry but whole cluster. So
What's that mean?
stems. So when we talk about whole bunch, that's when it goes into the fermentation with stalks and stems and things like that. When we talk about whole berry, it's destemmed fruit, but all the berries remain intact. So imagine that your berries are picked and you almost have like two airbags kind of pushing against each other to shake them off the vines and things like that. So you tend to take out those green kind of characteristics. But this has just this incredible savouriness to it that, like you said, reminds me of like rhubarb and rhubarb stalks and things like that.
But even like it's got tannin, but it doesn't have like, it's not overwhelming. Like this is why I want to chill it down. Like I want to chill down. I'll have a bit of duck in front of me.
Yeah.
This is one of the most delicious things I've had. I mean, I think I've said that about every single wine, but it's just this perfume. Like it's quite perfumed and it's beautiful fruit. It's got that savory character. It's got lovely acidity. It's just nice and light.
Yeah.
This is a summer drinking. Like you can drink stuff like this during summer.
This is an all-rounder. Like it's so complex and so delicious, and again with a little bit of chill on it. But this is, like you said, this is, you know, duck pancakes. This is also chilled summer red without anything with it. This is your cheese plate wine, charcuterie, all of that kind of stuff. It is an MVP in my house because it just goes with everything.
What price-wise, where would this sit?
Price-wise, this sits about 35.
Okay, that's
Actually,
so
it could be close to 38.
So it's more of a weekly drink, not an everyday drink.
Yeah. Friday night kind of socializing kind of
This is
thing.
a special occasion.
It depends on your budget.
It depends on the budget.
Judgment.
Absolutely. This is delicious. So you can buy it online, like now not available anywhere else? Like not.
So buy it online. It is also available on your usual online retailers like our friends at Different Drop and things like that. So and in restaurants. So
actually, you could probably find a lot of this stuff on Different Drop.
Absolutely.
Not that I should be promoting someone else's.
I know,
but
but
fine.
that's all right.
We're going to do that today because we're friends with everyone. Love it. Well, that is delicious. I've never tasted a Munya by itself.
Really?
Yeah, I've never tasted
So the
it.
other great one to sort of keep an eye out for is our friends at Murdoch Hill in the Adelaide Hills in South Australia. They also do a straight Pinot Meunier, and it's absolutely beautiful as well. So
and does it need like a certain climate to grow? Like
cooler is better
for Meunier, yeah.
It's the same principles as Pinot. They don't
Noir,
handle the heat very well.
Okay.
They're a temperamental kind of grape.
They're a bit
precious and delicate. So
I love it.
they need a bit of a light touch. You don't want to throw too much at it in terms of oak. So again, this is fermented in old oak puncheons for about 10 months and that kind of thing. So same with, you know, Adelaide Hills, again, slightly higher elevated temperature. There's a bit of Pinot Meunier, obviously down in Tasmania and things like that. So
that is such a treat. Thank you so much for sharing that one.
You're welcome.
Oh, so happy. So happy. Now, I'm not even going to try and kind of say the next one, but it's by Kerner. Is that right? Kerner, and it's the Mamolo 19.
Yes.
You can say the grape
variety is Ciccarello.
Ciccarello. Now, as someone who imports Italian wine, and particularly Tuscan wine, I'm embarrassed I didn't know what this is. So please, explain for those playing at home.
Well, it's not like it's a super Tuscan. It's not you'd come across it very often. So Ciccarello, so Kerner obviously comes from Clare Valley in South Australia. However, the cuttings for this came from a private nursery over in the Swan Valley in Western Australia.
Really?
So Swan Valley in Western Australia, Clare Valley in South Australia, and the Chalmers nursery block down in Mildura in Victoria are the only plantings of this, we believe, in Australia. If anyone else has any out there and they're watching this, yell out because but according to sort of all the research and when speaking to John O'Kerner, that's...
But how do they even get it here? Is it really the stories like the guy in Hunter Valley, the first one who bring Barbera and he brought it in his suitcase?
Oh, the gumboot clones and things like that. The process now is a little bit more formalised. So obviously you can get it through the CSIRO. There's germplasms, there's nurseries. Chalmers in particular, obviously since the late 80s, have been propagating all these really weird and wonderful, more so Italian varietals. The very first wine that I ever had the pleasure to make from start to scratch was Australia's first Menthea with Karina Wright down in McLaren Vale in South Australia.
You make wine too?
I do, and I say the word make wine loosely. Yeah. So I do a Somm vintage, which is usually about 10 days, and I do that twice. I do that twice a year. So I usually do one in Australia and one in
I
in
love
one
it.
in New Zealand. For me, it's kind of about having that connection, one to the land, which makes me really happy, and also being able to see what's happening with Australian wine on the ground and talking to people and things like that. So obviously with all the communication that I do and with hosting for Wine Australia and my specialty being Australian wine, I find it really important to like get out there on the land as much as possible. Obviously,
really cool.
it's hurting my heart a little bit that
That you
I haven't been
can't.
able to travel at the
Yeah.
moment.
So I'm
But
going to go back a little bit before we talk about this wine. How did you get into this?
How did I get into
How
wine?
did you become so passionate about wine?
So my backstory is I was doing a degree in art history and English literature at university because I was dead set certain that I was going to be a museum curator. Art was the
wow.
only thing that I had ever loved in school.
Amazing.
And I was just, obsessed. So what I did was work basically at university and pay my way through university by working at vintage cellars. So this was, 16 years ago now. And it was back in the day when they were still independently owned.
Yeah.
So there was a lot more focus on education, and also each individual store was a reflection of the manager's sort of tastes and spectrum and things like that.
Nice.
So it was such a great environment for me to learn about wine as that introduction and things like that. So I got to the end of my degree and had fallen in love with the wine industry. I've fallen in love with how wine becomes part of people's collective story, how you can be part of, different occasions. I loved how you took a grape and it became this whole other experience. I loved obviously the story of agriculture and being on the land and food and all of it. So I decided to become a sommelier because they had the best access to wine and leave my education. And then from there, it kind of just progressed.
Did you finish your degree?
I did. I finished my degree.
Good.
So 4 years later, and from the critiquing side of things, I still obviously use that with wine communication.
Of course, but you go like it's art, it's history.
Absolutely.
If you want to understand history, look at wine.
Of course.
If you want to understand art, look at wine.
Absolutely.
And literature, I mean, you need to know how to write.
All of that. So
That's awesome.
it did come in handy after a while.
Yeah, that's great.
So for me, it was more about I couldn't write about or I couldn't communicate about something that I didn't understand in every facet. So I've done the retail thing, I've done the Somm thing with
Now
obviously
you've
food
done
and
the
wine
winemaking.
matching, and going out and being in the vineyards at least twice a year from a wine, picking, making point of view.
Yeah.
And then all of that together for me gives that whole 360 view of what's going on. And
That's
then for
awesome.
me it was, I'm here in Australia and that's what I wanted my focus to be, to support, the regions that are on my back doorstep. And also, what we do here is really, really exciting.
It's really exciting. No,
So-
I love it. All right, so let's go back to Kerner. Sorry, Kerner. We got a bit
Sorry,
sidetracked.
boys.
I'm just having a chat.
So
Clare
made by
Valley-
brothers Jono and Damien.
Yep.
In the Clare Valley. So
It's unfiltered, I'm assuming.
unfiltered, unfined.
Unfined. You can tell. It's like gorgeous colour, but can't see through it, which is awesome.
So actually all of these wines are unfiltered and unfined.
Yeah, okay. So vegans would love it.
Vegans would
Vegans
love it.
love these wines. So tell me more about these. Like, what am I expecting from this?
Okay, so for me, this always reminds me of like gin and tonic, botanicals, violets, blue fruits. Again, that bit of that rhubarb stalk that we were talking about before with the Pinot Meunier.
Super tannic as well.
Yeah, really
Lots of
bright,
acidity.
drying tannins. But there's something so juicy and voluptuous about this wine. It's velvety and gorgeous. And on a winter's day like today, where it's not super, super cold, but it's also by no means warm, this wine is kind of perfect.
What sort of volume are these? Like
We're talking like 200 dozen.
say,
at
like, do people
most.
make money on are Australian wineries sustainable by like doing stuff like this?
I think it comes back to what we were talking about before about that innovation, and Australia always being at the forefront of that innovation, is that people aren't scared off by these new varietals or these new techniques and things like that. As long as the wine is crafted and made well, and I think, you can see after the 6 that we've tried here, there's certainly no question about that whatsoever. They are all
absolutely.
handcrafted and beautiful and completely faultless.
Faultless, yeah, absolutely.
So,
Which is going to be my issue today. I was like, oh god, is she going to bring in a whole bunch of
which
stuff that
anyone
tastes
who
like
knows me is
barnyards
not
and-
my style at
Cool,
all.
I
And
love
a
it.
lot of that comes down to I work on a consulting project with an oenology company called Lullamond.
Okay.
And they focus on wine microbiology. So through obviously a bunch of sessions with scientists, having technically clean wines is really important to me. That's not to say that, you can't experiment, but what's the point of creating an experiment if you're trying to fight through VA or Brett or some sort of microbiological issue to get to the flavour?
Exactly. I always feel a lot of them people who should be making beer are just making wine. You know what I mean? It's like
cheeky little cider project on the side.
That's it. But these are absolutely clean. They're easy. You can have them with food. You can chill them down. Summer's days. I love it. It still respects there is an old world element to this wine, which I really admire, even though they're from the Clare Valley. It's really special.
It's a really, really beautiful wine. So this basically, the original vines for this were planted in 1998. So the Sangiovese, which the Ciccarello is grafted onto, was planted in 1998.
Oh.
It was then grafted with Ciccarello in 2011.
So to graft it, they just replace the vine. Is that right? Yeah. So they wanted to just replace what they thought Sangiovese wasn't going to work.
So the root stock was, Sangiovese, and then you graft over the top kind of thing. So it's almost like a splicing.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much. That is such a treat.
I love this one. So again, different drop. You can find it online. You can find it on their website. I think as well, especially in these, COVID era times, it's always kind of a bit good to go straight to the source of these wineries and things like that. Yeah. And also it gives you a chance to try a few other different things. A lot of them will do mixed packs and things like that. So.
And price-wise, where would something like this sit?
Price-wise, pretty much they all kind of sit in similar kind of spots. The rosé would be about 28. Obviously Dredgie's Chardonnay, at this vintage you can't buy anymore, but it would sit at more at 45.
That's great value for money.
Great value
for money. Good on you.
Kerner, sits obviously in that sort of 35 kind of range as well.
Yeah, these are great and they look fantastic. I mean, you'll be able to sit at a dinner table, be able to share these stories. Hopefully people can do that after watching this.
That's what's exciting about these wines is the story. Like if you think about, even if we look back on this video, a lot of things that we've been talking about aren't necessarily the flavors of them. It's really important. They're delicious. Yeah. But I think, and that's what sucked me into the wine industry in the first place, was being able to tell these stories because that adds to that experience.
Well, I love it. And now we're going to have to fight over who's taking the bottles home, let's face it. Does anyone have any questions? I do hope you've enjoyed this. I think we've overwhelmed people today.
Just bombarded them with information.
There's a lot of information.
I apologize.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. As a communicator, as someone who's in the industry and you're seeing it, what do you think's next? What do you think is the next level of experimentation for Australian wineries?
Oh, if I'm in with my crystal ball kind of thing, I think it's really just taking this to the next level. I mean, the thing that we haven't really touched on, apart from obviously talking about Adelaide Hills and the bushfires and things like that, is obviously climate change and global warming and things like that.
Okay,
Sure. We always call winemakers the canary in the coal mine. If you look at all these what we call alternate varietals or these new wave varietals like Ciccarello and the Pinot Meunier and things like that, a lot of them were planted a decade ago because agriculturally, winemakers are farmers at heart. They're looking forward to the future. They're thinking in decades of what's actually going to be sustainable, not only agriculturally, but also from a winemaking point of view. What's going to be able to handle the heat and less water and all these other factors that they need to think about, which again are all the factors that go into making these wines that a lot of people don't actually think about. When their favorite wine runs out, a lot of people are like, oh, well, why can't I just get more of that? Because it's an agricultural product and there's only a finite amount of it.
Exactly.
So, I think moving forward, we're going to see more and more of this experimentation with great varietals and also using things that have obviously less alcohol. So lighter, more aromatic styles of wine and things like that. Experimentation with sparkling and bubbles because obviously it's less cost consuming than traditional styles of sparkling and things like that. So
I love it.
We're going to see more of this, which is really exciting for me, not only as a Somm, but also an Australian wine communicator.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
No, I really admire you. I think you're amazing. I think you're an absolute rock star. Thank you for introducing me to some brands that wines, the brands I know, the wines I did not know. So thank you. And hopefully we'll have to have you back.
Would love to.
Yeah, anytime. Some new stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, guys. Please remember to connect with Sam on social media. If you just go at SL_Payne, you'll be able to connect with her. She's awesome. And also, I should mention, she has a business called Full Glasses. It's the candles, like soy candles made in the full moon, like around the full moon, using Pinot Noir and Chardonnay grapes. So it's very, very cool. And I want to thank you once again for joining me on this episode. And I know I got so much out of this conversation, and I learned so much about this new wave of Australian wine. Please remember to follow Sam on social media. Check out fullglasses.com to get your own soy candles. And once again, I'm Angelica Nora, and I look forward to seeing you next week for In the Bottle, where we will be joined by the wonderful winemakers of Kunu and Tohu in New Zealand. See you next week.